We're winging this, you guys.
Yeah.
That's how we always do it.
Yeah.
No, we don't wing it. But it is conversational.
Yeah,
Molly,
what
RJ,
are we talking
welcome.
about with Molly and RJ?
RJ,
It's
this
a
is
gang.
a microphone.
This is,
I love this,
I
RJ.
know, this is awesome. I don't know microphones anymore now that I'm not.
Now that you're on it, you can't make fun of it anymore.
Dang it. I'll make fun of it.
What do you mean you don't know microphones? You're always taking care of me on Sunday morning,
Oh,
man.
I know.
Rod, you must put your pack on for people to be able to hear you.
Oh,
Oh,
I love
the
it.
sight of RJ just gives me security
The
on
sight.
Sunday morning.
I love it. I went up to you to be like, hey, you need to turn your mic on. You're like, I know. I don't want anyone to hear me singing.
Yeah.
There's plenty
Which,
of
by the
black-
way,
plenty
they
of black
left
men.
my mic on one Sunday, and I didn't even know it. Because, when you're in the center, all the speakers are facing
Yeah.
outward, so you don't know. And anyway, I was singing, and I think
While you were on stage?
Maddie was on the board, and she didn't turn me off. You told
While
me
you're on
this.
stage?
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes skill.
Hey, I
You
love
were
you,
just
Matt.
worship
Maddie, you're
leader.
great.
You got to know too. If you're gonna do something embarrassing,
Yeah, exactly. That's why mine's off.
yeah,
Pop the mute.
or just do
button on.
the stage sing. Just mouth it.
There you go.
That's
Exactly.
That's the secret trick.
And then you just get the ha,
Yeah.
as Rod likes it. Molly, good to have you back as
Hey,
well.
thanks.
How's students going?
It's been super good. 2024 is off to a good start, so can't complain.
And we're in the process of interviewing a bunch of people for our next youth pastor, which is super exciting. How's that going?
Going well, yeah. I just met a couple guys last week, and they both were pretty good. Got another one next week, so yeah.
Love
I'm
it.
excited about the potentials here.
Good. So you're part of the process?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
But, I mean, it's flourishing right now.
Yeah.
You, Brent, the whole team, Jake.
Jake Blakeney. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I want to put a shout out, though, to Molly. She has been the glue through this whole season of just keeping the whole thing together, the consistent one, and very grateful for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rod.
And I know it
Shout
wasn't
out.
easy all the time. It's hard to be the glue. And it's all the parts and pieces from students to leaders to parents and trying to hold it all together.
Yeah.
So very grateful.
And on the
Surrounded-
worship side, RJ's been
Same thing. RJ, honestly.
so much of the
A
glue.
lot of transition in the past couple months for everybody around
Yeah.
here. It's been good though. It's cool to see everybody like stepping up in a good way and just changing, like kind of just flowing with like new positions or new like responsibilities. I don't know. It's been really cool.
I
to
like
see.
how you put that. It's more than just evolving. You
Yeah.
guys have stepped up.
Yeah.
I mean, your responsibilities went way up.
Yeah.
And
They shifted a ton too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Well, for people that don't know, RJ, give us a flavor for your time at Crossroads.
my time at Crossroads.
Or just,
yeah. I mean, today is my 6th year anniversary.
wow.
February 20. So, I've been around since 2010, since back in the Walker Charter, North Point days. So, I've been around for a while.
So that
But,
reaches all the way back to Greg Dempster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Greg was the one who I auditioned at the building across the street in the Stone House. And I played on the worship team for years and then finally got hired here 6 years ago. Part-time to do audio stuff, just audio. And then that quickly evolved into doing audio and facilities stuff, and then turned into full-time and added video work on top of that. And I've been doing that for the past 5.5 years. And then,
And so, I mean, there's a shout out even just to that. Like all the videos that our people see on a Sunday morning or on our website, those are all produced by this guy right here.
99% of them are shot and edited by me. So, we've had some help from some key people throughout some of those videos. But, and then so recently, I've kind of taken more responsibility on the worship side of my job. So like the music side of it, since all the transition happened last August, I've been taking on a lot of the planning for the worship team, scheduling, communication, playing electric guitar on Sundays, music directing. I've taken on kind of a lot of that, or all of that really, in the past few months. So yeah, it's just kind of letting go, and then Quinn being on board as Quinn. Well as that has kind of taken a lot of those other responsibilities that I've been doing for the past 5 years or 6 years. He's kind of now, I'm pushing that on him. So yeah, that's what I mean. It's just been such a cool like experience to see my world just kind of shifting. But yeah, I love it though. It's so cool to have the history of Crossroads and know the culture, and then finally getting to have the reins of it a little bit is kind of fun. So
it's a blast for me to watch it as a coach, to just watch people not just evolve but grow and take on more and then thrive in that. And you're just killing it, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun. I love it. But we'll see what happens this year. We got a fun year planned, I think. So
I do too. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
it's awesome. All right, anything for you, Rod, that you couldn't cover on Sunday that you wish that you could have about this text? Anything you left on the cutting room floor? I wanted to start there as a launching point. Do you think of anything off the top of your head?
I feel like I was kind of long on Sunday, so I almost feel like I have to apologize for that.
45 minutes.
And in that, I covered everything.
There we go. I love it.
The one little piece at the end, I didn't really... When that interaction between Sarah and the Lord at the very end of our text, where she says, I didn't lie. And then the Lord says, yes, you did. I don't know what you guys think about that, but that's in our Bible. And I mean, like, why is it there? These are the questions I ask of the text.
Well, I mean, it's such a human experience. I think that it's so easy to be deceived and think that we can keep things from God. I mean, think about just even our hidden sin. Like how often we live in this realm where we think like, oh, maybe God doesn't see this, you know? And she literally says, God, I didn't laugh.
Right.
As if God couldn't see her laugh. And then, hey, my mic just changed.
Yeah, it does sound better now.
I love it. Thanks, Quinn. Yeah, I don't know. That's where my mind went when I read it. Is just like, how many things do I think that I can actually keep hidden from the Lord?
Right. We can't get anything past him. And that's exactly one of the takeaways. So, I mean, there was a whole point there, if you wanted to make it, that here is Sarah in the presence of God trying to please him, and in that lying, you know, saying, I did not laugh, like thinking she could get that past the Lord, but she couldn't. And the Lord also let her know that she couldn't, which I think is a grace in and of itself as well.
Like, well, I think that's actually the only type of love that actually transforms us, because God says, I see you in even this moment where you're directly lying to my face, but he's not abandoning Sarah in that moment. So, Molly, RJ?
You said on Sunday that it was like a laugh, like internal, right?
Right.
So that's, to me, the bigger thing that's like, it's less of the like hidden sin in my mind and more of the like, all right, what is your, like your mind can be sinning and like just subconsciously like doubting and like just doubting God. And then he comes around and says like, hey, no, even like you didn't do anything out loud. You didn't do anything physical. Like there's still sin in your heart. And I think that's the bigger like takeaway, I feel like, from my point of view.
That is a phenomenal point. And I'm glad you made it, RJ, because that is exactly what God is dealing with in this situation. It's nothing that was heard by anybody. That's why Sarah thinks she can get away with it. Yeah. But I, the Lord, I search the heart. I know your heart.
Yeah.
That gets a little bit scary almost. You know what I mean? Like we can zip it, but we can have a lot of stuff going on inside our hearts and our minds, things that we're thinking and doing and all kinds of stuff going on the inside, and God sees it all. And it all matters to God. And yet in that too, God is still amazingly gracious. He just lets her know, you didn't get away with that. Like, I know what's going on inside of you. And he just leaves it at that.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Proverbs 21. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but God weighs the heart. Like, Sarah thinks she's right. From her earthly point of view, I'd think that I was right.
In what sense does she think she's right?
To think that it's crazy that she would have a son at this point in her life.
Oh, right. Exactly.
You know, like, let's just be, I mean, it's easy now to read it and go, oh yeah, like, why didn't you have faith? God has been very clear. You're going to have the son. But I mean, come on. I'm sitting there going, I'd probably be the one laughing the cynical laugh, not the joyful laugh.
Yeah.
I'd be Sarah. So, I mean, maybe that's where we can start. Like, has there ever been a time in your lives, even in your faith walk, that you can think of where you've given up that hope, where you've become cynical? And then what was it? How did God guide you through that? It's vulnerable.
Yeah,
question.
I would say years ago for me, Libby and I, our marriage went into the tank, and it was there for months. And we were both in ministry. I was a youth pastor. We're quote unquote doing these good things for God, and it just feels like God's letting us down. And the marriage itself looked hopeless. And so in that, like, I just remember having times with God that were pretty raw and honest. Of just like, why are you doing this to me? Why is this happening? I don't think God was upset that I was conversing with him that way. I think he likes the raw and the honest. But there was certainly a season of my life where, yeah, I can very much relate to Sarah. I mean, when you think about it, Sarah's 70 years old when God actually comes to her and says, look, you're going to have descendants as great as the stars in the skies and the sand on the beach. And our text today, it's 20 years later, she's 90 years old. I don't know too many people who at 70 at the beginning would have been like, I believe that, you know?
Yeah.
She believed it. And yeah, she's amazing, but she's also very human. What about you guys?
This is maybe an example, but it reminded me of that when we were reading our text when she said that she didn't laugh. I feel like there has been times in my life where I like deceived myself into that I wasn't sinning, and like I truly believe that I didn't do anything wrong, and then it's like maybe I've like thought like a foul thought about someone or like judged someone in a certain way. And I'm like, no, like, I didn't do that. I would never do that. And God's like, yeah, you have. And, like, that's not honoring to me. And it's like, oh, I actually am being, like, disrespectful to him. I guess, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
A time when we become cynical, right? Is the question. So I guess for me, long story short, so I have also worked at another church before, Crossroads, and working for other churches that require a lot of so I'm a tech guy, so a lot of production work,
Production and perfection.
yeah. There's a coming from that background, and being part of my job was to be setting up lights and making a show happen for church. Working in that like pattern for months and years at a time, like really just started to like grow like a pretty big like not hatred, but just like a real disdain for kind of how church was done in America, or just in this like kind of like modern sense of how you think of church. And it just took a toll on me, and that this is glossing over a lot in this story, but just seeing how church has just become a show, and how cool can we make it look, and how cool can we make it sound, and how does it all work, just kind of like seeing the like gears turn every single week really put like a really big like, is this really what we want? Is this really church? Is this really what God wants, just because we're preaching the word on Sunday. Like, is all this wrapped together really church, or really how it's designed? And so that, I mean, those couple of years that I was working there was really hard for me to like really see the like purpose of church and what God had intended for the gatherings. And that was a big time in my life where I was like, I don't know if this is for me, or is this really God's work? Is this how it's meant to be? So yeah.
Beyond switching churches, how did God restore hope in your life about the church in general?
Through people specifically in my case, like it was through a relationship that I had with somebody from Crossroads that had been walking with me throughout, had been friends with me throughout my whole time working at the other church. And really it was just like, hey, this is just a one-on-one relationship that I had with people that knew my story and kind of knew the hurt that I was in, and they were able to walk with me out of that, ultimately here to Crossroads. But it was honestly just through people. So yeah.
I'm so glad that you persevered through that, RJ, because you could have walked away, because I know those experiences. I've had my own front seat to it, and yet I was never really on the firing line. You were always probably on the firing line in terms of like, make it better, more perfect.
Yeah.
And then it's like light, stage, action, showtime.
Yeah.
And the church gets reduced to that. And you do that week after week after week with then people telling you it's got to be more, better. Yeah. And you're like, really, this is what this whole thing is about. Yeah. And I've also been a part of that, which I would like to think, well, I'll at least say this. This is why we're partnered together. Yeah. Because we don't want Crossroads to be that. We fight that, right?
Yeah.
And if people are ever wondering at our church, especially new people that come and think, why is this done so simply? Yeah. Or why isn't there more detail put to your online production? We're intentional in all this.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's not that we're intentionally trying to stay a long way from the church being a production. Yeah. At the same time, we don't want things to get in the way, so we try for sound and excellence and things like that. But if something goes wrong in a service, it's like, okay, no big deal.
I feel like we believe as a church that there's a big difference between excellence and perfection here. So if we mess up, if there's a case in point, a couple weeks ago,
probably
someone was leading worship and started the song in the wrong key, and at like a lot of places, that's a pretty big like roadblock, and it's something that would get talked about in some sort of meeting or something. But here it's just laugh it off and hey, let's start again.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's the type of thing where it's like we don't take ourselves too seriously. But like what we're doing is we're gathering here like the saints. It's a gathering. Exactly. So it's not a show, and we don't treat it that way. But we do have a high like level of excellence that we want. Like what we're doing is for God every Sunday. So we believe that like let's do what we can with what we have here to the best of our ability, but knowing that, hey, if we're human too, like we're going to mess up, we're going to forget a chord, we're going to forget or type in a word wrong in the lyrics, like that's okay. Like as long as what we do on Sunday is we are giving the best that we can, knowing that we're doing it for Christ in the room. I think that's the most that we can give. So
love that you're here, man. Now we're right back into that heart again, right? Like God's looking at our heart.
Yeah. And worship's about response, which is something that you talked about on Sunday, this idea that it's God initiating the contact with Sarah. It's God who chooses to bless her with this son. It's God who remains faithful to her. It's God who's going to preserve this family line once Isaac is finally born. And performance makes it all about us. Now, I came to faith in a church that was high production, And there's a lot of amazing people in those churches. So we're not sitting here
Nothing bad
dogging
about those
and judging.
things,
It's about the heart, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it can be this really thin line between production and perfectionism and excellence. And then,
Yeah, and I feel like every church has like a lane that they're called to. Like,
yes.
No, there's nothing. And coming from a tech person, I love lights and I love a good show. I don't feel like there's anything sinful inherently about like that kind of thing. So there are churches out there that do have the heart, and they happen to do lights and cameras and all that, which is fine. But I feel like here at Crossroads, we just aren't called to that.
We both had our experiences.
Okay.
You had yours, I had mine, and it's like, this is what we're going to be.
Yeah, this is...
And stay true to it.
Yeah, and it's a healthy, it's a sustainable thing for, the turnover rate for tech people in some of those churches is a couple years.
Yeah.
They just turn through people so quickly, and it's like, it's because the machine is always hungry, and you gotta make the show happen every week, and it's a lot. And when there's no heart behind it or reason behind it, it gets empty real quick, and that's where you get burnout from guys like me, where they're like, what is the point? Like, I could be doing all this on some big tour, and that's a different thing. Like, you're putting on a show for entertainment, but when you're doing that same thing under the like guise of it's for God, like, but it's not really, that's where it starts feeling like, what am I doing? Like, and you start like, you see the fruit that comes out of that, and it just doesn't feel like it's of God, and it's healthy for people that show up and like experience that kind of thing. And it just feels just so empty.
Think about all the wisdom you have from your experience that you're now bringing here. Bless God.
Yeah.
But in all of this, you're not a cynic, RJ.
I know.
And you have hope. And I think right now it's, going back to what we're talking about in this passage, like she has what she thinks in her mind, righteous reasons to be cynical about this. She's old. She doesn't know if this promise is going to be fulfilled. And I feel like this cynicism around the church is so in vogue right now. I mean, it's so easy to walk in and then out of a church and just be a cynic, be a critic. So going back to my question, like you said it was people. So it was people. And in this passage, the Lord appears to them through these three guys. God sends people into their lives. So walk us through the story a little bit. Can you give us, Rod, so that for those that maybe weren't here on Sunday, they understand what we're talking about in Genesis 18.
So Abraham has just been circumcised. That's all. That's the wedding ring of the covenant that was just made between him and God. I mean, their hearts are bound together, and he's sitting in his tent. He's in pain. Okay, and he's a 100-year-old man, and these three strangers show up. The text does not want us to know who they are. It's the Lord and two angels, and yet to Abraham, they're just three strangers, and we see how this man is just so given to the stranger and to showing hospitality. And it's not just him. It's his wife, Sarah. It's Ishmael, who's also been circumcised.
Yeah.
And Abraham just runs out there to welcome him, runs back to his tent, yelling to his family, let's go. We have visitors here. Let's prepare a feast. They kill the fattened calf, and it all culminates with Abraham sitting under that tree after he's presented them this feast. I can just see him just with a big smile on his face, just so happy as they're indulging, in this wonderful food that he just prepared for them, that his family prepared for them. So,
and then they come and they say, "Where's Sarah?"
Yes.
And one of the points that you made was super interesting on Sunday. Abraham probably would have been just like
freaked
beside
out
himself.
Like, what? How do you know who Sarah is? And not Sarai, but she had her name changed just a few days. Yeah, Sarah. So at that moment, I think he's just like, God has appeared to him before. So now I think it's like, God's back. I think he knows. And, God then says a year from now, Sarah will have a son in her arms. This 90-year-old woman. You know, they're told that, but they're also asked to believe it. It's more than just information. They're asked to believe it.
They have to do something about it.
They have to do something about it. Yes. I mean, even that. Like, Sarah, again, didn't say it, thought it, but the Lord knows her thoughts. Shall I again have pleasure? And I always read that thinking the pleasure of having a child, but no, it's the word for sexual pleasure. Are you kidding? Like, shall I have pleasure with my husband at this age? He's old.
And beyond that, he's brought other women into the marriage.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of separation in their marriage, alienation, hurt feelings. I mean, I mentioned just bringing Hagar, a younger woman, into this marriage to try to fix the problem of Sarah's barrenness. But even before that, they went down to Egypt, and Pharaoh had eyes for Sarah, and, you know, Abram allowed her to go into his bedroom, you know. So there's a lot of hurt and probably the fruit of bad decisions that's just festering in this marriage.
So what's the hope for, you know, people that are reading this that are going, this is my marriage?
That God wants to heal it. That he wants to heal it from the inside out. And it's going to require faith. It's going to require doing hard things. I mean, I don't think that would be easy for someone like Sarah at that point in the game. Whatever her hurt feelings are to her husband, I don't know, even at that age, if she feels beautiful or not. You know, all of these things are going on inside of her. And yet, God is saying, I'm not going to do the virgin birth right now. You're going to have to have sex with your husband, trust me.
And it takes both sides, I think, too. It's not just I can fix it by myself type situation. Like, for all these things to come together, like, it's got to be both parties need to have some sort of reconciliation.
You're talking husband and wife.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, he said that. I love what you said. You said there actually had to probably be a little bit of reconciliation relationally before they even did this. So there's some work to be done in the relationship.
RJ, what you're saying, if you're going to get to that spot where we're going to the bedroom, there's a lot of time around the table, right? Probably
for
of
sure.
Just like talking things out
Yeah.
and dealing with all the hurts and laying them all on the table and getting emotionally and relationally intimate again, spiritually intimate.
Yeah. It's not just something that I can fix by myself. I need to work on my relationship with God first and then assume that everything else, like, especially in a marriage, talking like a marriage, like covenant and relationship, like, I'm just one side of it and the wife or the husband has to be the same, like, on the same page for true reconciliation to happen, I feel like. So I think that's a huge part of that too.
This is flushing out something I didn't preach on Sunday, which I think is incredibly important, this detail. And two husbands are talking here.
Yeah, right? I want to know Molly's thoughts on all of this.
She's like, disagree.
I'm very new into marriage, so I'm still learning all of this. Oh man, guys, I don't know. My mind has been freezing this whole podcast, so I'm trying to think.
You're fine, Molly.
Do you have any a question that I could answer?
Well, describe to me how you look at your relationship with your husband. Like, what is for you to feel close to him? What is the most important thing for him to show you? And I have an answer from my wife in my mind, and I'm looking for confirmation.
I would say verbal affirmation and just a visible desire to be with me.
Yeah.
And affirming me in that way so that you can I feel wanted. Not just being comfortable, because it's easy to be comfortable and have expectations, but feeling wanted is different.
No, it's great. That's exactly what my wife says. She'll say things like, and I'm sure she got this from a book or something, but like, your I do was not enough. For me, now I'm talking about me, Tryg. I never wake up and think, does my wife love me? I don't know. Like, that doesn't run through I don't know if you guys are the same way, but I'm just like, she married me and she loves me, right? But she taught me that for her to really know that I love her meant my constant pursuit. Or my constant pursuit of her, like this returning to wooing her, that my I do was not enough. Does that make sense? Like emotionally, she wants this pursuit. So here, as we talk about Abraham, like there's going to be this pursuit again of Sarah in this marriage relationship where he is wooing her back to himself, right? That there's not this physical intimacy without emotional intimacy, which that was something, again, I had to learn as a young married guy. So I for sure, I can relate to what you're saying.
But even though the sex by faith is the thing that God is calling Sarah to, that is not the ultimate end of what God wants for their marriage or any marriage. He wants two people who are in covenant with each other, who are laying their lives down for each other, who love each other, who are relationally connected, emotionally connected, spiritually connected. And the fruit of that oftentimes is the physical connection.
Yeah. And he's trying to get Sarah to the place that Abram got to last chapter, because Abram's laughed expressed his faith, and Sarah's not there yet. And so they need to be unified in that as well. Yeah, I just think of what you talked about on Sunday too, this idea that when we are barren, we have much better chance of seeing our need for God. Can you give us some examples of barrenness beyond, obviously, the barrenness that we see in this passage? So when you said that on Sunday, I thought, I can think of a lot of areas. Like I don't even have the ability to have children, but I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, she says, literally, I'm an old, worn-out garment. And physically, she is old. She's 90 years old. I think she feels like a loser at this point in the story, a complete loser. And that she is the one that is holding everything back. She's holding Abraham back from having a family. She's holding God back. And because God is going to bring new creation to the world through this promised son, she's holding the whole world back. And I think she lives with these feelings day after day for a very long period of time. And that's where she's at. How does that translate today? I think we all have experiences where we feel like a loser. Where we just want to put the L on our forehead and just be like, world, this is what I am. I know I'm a loser right now. I have those feelings. I mean, they go all the way back. I remember I even used to, when I was first in ministry, I had these weird visualizations in my mind that I'm kind of embarrassed to say, but like when I felt like I was a loser, a complete loser in a situation, I would literally close my eyes and picture an arrow going right through my forehead and pinning me to the wall. That's dark, okay? And that was my way of just like expressing, just right now I feel like such a loser. And I think we can feel like losers in what we're asked to do, what we're asked to be, all of it. And there's something about that, though. The converse can oftentimes be pride, and God is so opposed to the proud. So while loser is not what we need to think of ourselves, there is a sense, though, I like the idea of just we're barren. We don't, in and of ourselves, apart from God, we are utterly barren.
Yeah.
And I hope I made that point well on Sunday, that at the end of the day is really what we offer God is our barrenness. That's what the story of Sarah is teaching us, which also should in many ways like let us off the hook from having to like manufacture all of this goodness and all of a sudden like, now God, is it enough? Like we get on this treadmill of faster, 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 faster. Is this enough? nope, faster. Is this enough? And that thing will always lead to despair.
Yeah. It's interesting because we just obviously
Yes.
had staff prayer, which we have on Tuesday mornings, and Jeremiah, our missions pastor, opened up the word and started our prayer time by reading 1 Corinthians 1:26. Remember, Paul says, dear brothers and sisters, that few of you were wise in the world's eyes or powerful or wealthy when God called you. Instead, God chose the thing the world considers foolish in order to shame those who think they are wise. And he chose the things that are powerless to shame those who think they are powerful. And it's this beautiful picture of, this barrenness, that apart from Christ, even if we have the accolades of the world, we are nothing. But in him, we have everything. Can you think of any connections there?
Yeah.
Molly? Yeah.
Well, it just reminds me, I feel like the times where I feel like the most, in your words, loser, or like lacking, like that's where I see my need for the Lord the most. Like you said, I have written down, it's representative of our true brokenness, our lack of Jesus. And like, it's in those times where I'm like, God, I'm just such a bad Christian. Like, I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep messing up. And like, that's just the beauty of it, is he just like looks at me and he's like, I still see you all the same. Like, let's keep doing this. Let's keep going. And like, that's how I find Jesus again and again, is like coming to that place of like lacking everything and needing everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
That's
goes back.
so good.
It's so good, but it goes back to this idea of identity. Like, God has committed this promise to Sarah, so she will have a son despite how she feels. And as Christians, we have a secure identity despite even the sin that now is an intrusion on our lives. And I had a professor in college that always used to say, humility is synonymous with honesty. This is not about thinking, this is not about self-shame, but it's just being honest about who you are. And if you're honest about who you are, then you'll be humble. And if you're humble, you have to be honest about yourself.
It's good.
And so it's just constantly having an honest evaluation. And this is why Paul literally says, like, it's kind of a joke that God would use me. I'm the chief of sinners. I'm not even deserving to be in the same category, he says, as all the other apostles. I was murdering Christians.
Yeah.
This is what Paul says. And then, but God he chooses to use me. And then this is where you went in your sermon, Rod, that there's a huge difference between laughter and cynicism and this like, oh my gosh, how wonderful is God? There's so much joy of just being like, it's kind of a joke that he loves me. It's kind of a joke that he wants to use me, but he does. Yeah. And so maybe we could talk about that. Like, I don't know. I think of the John Newton quote, where he says, I'm not what I ought to be. I'm not what I want to be. I'm not what I hope to be in another world, but I'm still not what I once used to be. And by the grace of God, I am what I am.
That's good. Paul, you brought up Paul, and you can see in his earlier writings to the church, he says, I, Paul, least of the apostles. Then in his later writings, he writes, I, Paul, least of all the saints, least of all the Christians. And then in his last letter, I, Paul, chief of sinners. And you see that he goes from being just least of the apostles, least of all the saints, I, Paul, chief of sinners. That actually is spiritual growth.
Yeah.
It's just Paul's realizing that, what he is. But then in that, you start to realize what Christ is. So I'm going to go back to you, though, Molly. Like, because you're in youth ministry and I was in youth ministry. I bet that you experience a lot of need there. Mm-hmm. You want to just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know. It just makes me think, like, just it all goes back to suffering. And, like, in a weird way, like, God is so kind to put us in these places where we're so low that we find our total need. And I see these students and I see so much need and a lot of sadness and, like, just, like, not understanding what's going on or why it's going on. And it's, like, in a weird way, almost like an excitement for them, because it's like, no, this is the place where God is really going to work in your life.
Yeah.
And like, this is like, if you really hone in here, like, and realize what God's doing, like, it's actually so beautiful. And like just seeing that spark and that click is just like huge.
And that's probably more true about this generation that you're working with than any American generation. Now, that's a pretty bold statement, but this generation feels a lot of need, probably much more than their parents and much more than their grandparents, maybe even more than their grandparents. They live in a very confusing, broken world.
Mm.
Yeah, we're living in the fruit of the generations that have went before us that have created the environment that we now live in that doesn't have a lot of physical needs for us to think a whole lot about. But as a result, I see a lot of students that are tormented by the bigger questions in life.
What I love about that is what you're saying, though, is there's actually probably more opportunity in light of all that.
I seriously, when I was in high school, I never thought the way these kids do. I've never had the questions that they had. No one around me had the passion that they have. And it's because they see so much darkness. They see the need for Jesus. And like when you come out of such a low place and find him, like the passion and the drive for your peers that you're seeing that in, for them to have that same experience is just that much more. And they like want to be bold in that. They do.
So give us an example of that. You said they see it in a completely different way. Help me understand that.
What do you mean?
Well, you said that they have questions that you didn't have when you were their age. They have thoughts that you didn't have.
I would just say like, how do I describe it? Or like put it into a sum, but
the world that they live in, though, isn't working.
No.
The world that we were raised in was a world that, quote unquote, was working. And like, if you do everything, then your life's going to work. And I don't think they all have even that hope. One, that the world is working and that there's hope that their life is necessarily going to end up working. I don't know if I'm touching on anything.
Yeah, I think, I don't know how to answer that question. Yeah. I just don't.
But you know it's different.
Yeah, it's like, I know because I've seen the passion that there is, that they're coming from something different than I came out of when I found Jesus. Like,
there's a contrast. There's a contrast. There's an actual contrast now between those that are putting their stake, which you talked about this too. I don't know if you said it second service, but first service you talked about the world that we're living in is so gray. Everything's gray. But a lot of the word and how God operates is actually in black and white. Mm-hmm. There's a contrast between how he operates and the world operates. There's a contrast between his people and the people of this world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I even think of like all of the like drama with sexuality that's going on right now, and like they are confronted with it so real, especially like those that are in public school, and like you're in a position where you have to make a decision on what you believe. Like you can't just be quiet because people will ask you questions, people want to talk about it. And like that's just something where you have to dig deep and like read scripture and know what you believe. And there's so many different things like that where people have to know like right from wrong and have to be able to stand up for what they believe in, because it gets talked about so much more than it used to.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, you were kind of in the group according almost to how you dressed, the clothes you wore, things like that. Now it's deeper than clothes. It's your sexuality. And that's now how you identify with this group or this group.
I loved what you said on Sunday too about like the world is so gray, but then we're asking our students or our kids to be something other than gray. And if the universe is gray and if everything else is meaningless,
how do we ask them to have meaning?
How do you? And I love that. That's like just like the wonder sucking environment that we live into. Like all that plays into just like students' lives right now too. And I just I can't imagine that world right now being a student. And it's
when wonder ceases, I think you said boredom and despair come.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's a big thing too. There is no, I mean, we don't allow ourselves to even get bored anymore. I mean, I know the temptation in my life to doom scroll, but in these kids, they grew up, like I didn't have an iPhone till, the iPhone came out in 2008 or whatever. So I didn't grow up with the iPhone. Now these kids, their
first devices are
exactly
iPhones.
Their first devices iPhones, and there's actually a crazy study, and I'm going to misquote it, but you can look it up, that shows what social media is doing to kids' brain. There's like this early onset dementia that's happening to our brains when we are just consumed. Our lives are consumed with just constantly being on social media, constantly being on the internet and just doom scrolling through things and not having to actually engage with content, but just having it seep into us all the time. And then we're in constant crisis mode because, of course, the top content that gets the most amount of views is always something that has to do with something negative or anyway. Yeah, I'm going
That's
on
a whole nother rabbit trail we can talk about
pedestal.
for
But
a long time.
I'll put a little commercial out there. Elon Musk recently posted this. It's a video made by Robbie Starbuck and family on the war on children. It's a 2-hour thing, and a lot of it is on the sexuality and social media, and the collision of those two things, or those two things working together, are seriously shaping our children, our young people. And it's definitely something that we need to be aware of, because you talk about something that's wonder killing. And they talk about this, and I remember it. When I grew up, I didn't have a screen to look at. We had to go outside. We had to create. We had to make things, build things, create fun things to do, and do it in it where we're interacting with each other. So it was highly social, highly relational. It was outside, experiencing the seasons, winter, spring, summer. And today, I mean, so much time is just spent in front of a screen. And go for it.
I feel like I hear this argument all the time, and the creative side of me is like, and someone who does video work and does online or like just media, that side of me is like, I don't hate all of the media stuff.
Right.
And I think that the quick like judgment that's like, all right, well, social media equals bad and video content equls bad. Totally. Let's get off of screens. And to me, that's like, how do we redeem that space the best we can?
I love it.
I don't think necessarily, because all the time in this world, you hear the like, well, let's just get rid of videos. Let's get rid of screens altogether, like, because that's just bad. And I'm just like, there's a lot of creative, like God has given us creativity. And in this generation, like creativity happens a lot on a computer.
Totally.
And graphic design and video work and audio, like that is still of
what
God,
we're doing right now.
Yeah. Like, totally. So to get rid of all that, is to totally just like dismiss that as a creativity gift from God and say, well, if screens are bad, then what does that do to my career? Or I know so many people in the video world who make films that are godly, and a lot of them come to this church. And to say that, well, let's get rid of your creative gift because we think that social media is bad is total. I don't know. I feel
that's music to my ears. I agree with hear you say that.
I agree with this 100%. But this is actually why we have to be even more cautious.
Yeah.
And this, what else? Some of the most intoxicating sins are good things that God designed for our good and for our pleasure to enjoy. And then He puts boundaries around them for our safety, so that those things don't become bad things. And so that's what I'm trying to say. All of these things can be redeemed, but if we don't have discipline and we don't have temperance with anything that is good in our life. You know, we're talking about a passage that deals with sexuality and how they're having to pick up the pieces of their marriage because the boundaries of sexuality, the boundaries of sex have been broken that God set up. And I think in the same way, that's what we're talking about.
So the boundaries, the balance, and all of that. But yet, if you can apply balance to this, and then if you could have Christians get a vision for how to redeem this vehicle and create the best movies, you know, the best shows, the best music.
Demonstrate boundary too. I think is an easy way. Like I don't know, just having someone that's doing video, like, hey, maybe that person's not always on their phone. Like every time I see them, maybe they're not always watching videos. And like, I think just like simple, like shifts like that could just start shifting culture of the, like, hey, we can partake in creating video and like doing social media. We can be influencers or whatever. Like, I don't think that's inherently bad, but let's have a good boundary on it where it's like, hey, this isn't my sole identity. And
it's so good, RJ.
It is.
Yeah. And that's the nuance that we need.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, we have the best story, so we should be the best storytellers.
Yeah.
And we should make use of all the means possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but with no boundaries. That's why I was just going back to, that's where we're talking about this digital dementia. And when you're living in the gray, you actually can't express creativity, right? We need to be in a place where there's the contrast of colors. That's what brings beauty to our eye. And which is why I think that Christian art should be some of the most beautiful art in the world.
Well, think about this. What God says to Sarah, is anything too wonderful for me? I don't know how that falls on you guys when you hear that, but when I was reading that as I was preparing for the week, like, that's my favorite part in the whole text, is God just saying these words, is anything too wonderful for me? And I love that it comes in the form of a question, first of all. And then I love what the question is, because I have to stop and then ask that what would I say to that question? If God's saying it to me, is anything too wonderful for me? And to think that God is the one who's behind wonder, and that there are no limits to the wonder or the wonderful thing that he can do. No limits. It's exciting.
I wanted to do So Will I at the end after your message, after I was listening to it, the creation story, just like the song So Will I by Elevation or Hillsong United.
Hillsong.
You should have made the switch, RJ.
I know, it's a too big of a song to pull off without practicing. But I was just as you were saying that on Sunday, I was like, man, just like the creation story and that whole thing is all just, I mean, it's the creativity side of God that is so like unlimited that we get to be a little part of it, I think, and have that little bit of creativity that's from God. That's like a massive, like, well.
No, and think about it, RJ. That song, there you go. That's a song. That's art.
Yeah.
That was created to capture just the wonder and the greatness of God.
Beautiful.
It is. And there again is the need for that.
Yeah. Mm. Someone spent a lot of hours behind a computer screen to make that song available too. So it all comes together. That's why it's just like, man,
so good to have.
We need to get that song in the repertoire sometime soon.
Right, let's do it Sunday.
Yeah. I love it.
No, I just love the clarity that you brought. That I confess that my temptation, I'm the all or nothing guy. So like the moment I start not liking something, just throw it all away. It's all evil. But to your point, I mean, anything can be redeemed. God can redeem any situation.
Just listen to these words. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. And in the vapor of your breath, the planets form. And if the stars were made to worship, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you've made, every burning star, a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praise, so will I. My favorite line, and I can tell it's a lot of people's favorites because in some of the songs they start clapping. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. When you lost your life, so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I.
Dang.
We should have done it. I know. I was thinking. I was like, texted
RJ's
Jacob.
in
Like,
the
can
in
we-
ears like, guys, so will I.
Pull
You guys
up one
know
of
it? Let's do it.
One of the wordiest songs out there. But I was like, that's too
Yeah.
much.
And I actually haven't even realized the power of those words because normally it's pretty quick.
Yeah, it's
When
a lot.
you're
It's a lot of
singing it.
words in that song.
Yeah, praise God for songwriters
I know.
and musicians, and my brain doesn't even function on that level. Or when we come in here and you're sitting at your computer doing your video editing. I might as well be blind trying to read Braille. Like I can't.
All
The things that Anyway, so
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we talk about social media and texting, okay? We call the Bible the text. It's a text
Yeah,
from
it's
God.
words.
Okay, and then think about what it is. It's not just words. It's not even story. It's drama. It's the greatest drama written by God. So God gives us text, drama. And then,
Yeah.
like in our story this week, he enters it. Oh, and how does he enter it? Reminds me of Joan Osborne's song, The Day. What if God were one of us? Just a slob like one of us. Just
Yeah.
a stranger on the bus. I don't know. Am I dating myself? There you go.
I know.
Right?
It. I know it.
Right?
Yeah.
And honestly, that's how God shows up.
Yeah.
Like a slob. I mean, not a slob. Just a stranger, a bloke, a dude with two other dudes.
That's why I think like how we, I don't know how do I word this right? How we do church like can be just like free and open, and we can praise God loud. We can like have like intimate times with God. If you look at like how God has chosen to communicate to us directly, it's not just like a ultra formal, like well written out letter. Like, no, there's laughter. There's the whole like up and down
Yep.
is there. And that to me speaks like, hey, there's freedom in how and creativity in how God has chosen to communicate with us. So why would we say, let's not celebrate that on a Sunday morning? Like, hey, we can do things like we can communicate creatively to God, and we can sing loud, we can sing quietly, we can do hymns, we can do a brand new song. Like there's so many variations and ways that we can talk to God. And for I'm kind of going down a rabbit
No, but can I
trail.
also
That's
just
pointed,
even like
but-
do a shout out for our Ash Wednesday service?
yeah.
Because I felt like that thing, if anyone was there, we stepped into what I would say some more freedoms.
Yeah.
There was just a lot of participation. I mean, avenues for participation, avenues for people to live into in that gathering what their hearts needed or what their hearts were compelled to do.
Yeah.
Anything from praying to singing to going to this station to put ash on their forehead, to going to another station to get prayer, to going to another station, take communion, do mikvah. Like, and yet there was no time set aside for just this. It's like at any point in time, you know, a person could be on their own journey in that gathering.
Yeah.
And
It's all worship to God.
it's all worship to God. And
Yeah.
we're all together too, worshiping together, but
Yeah.
not all doing the same thing at the same time, which I thought Nate did a phenomenal job of putting that gathering together.
Yeah.
And think about how creative God is to communicate with us through things, through symbols, through prayer, through his word, through other Christians. And then you look at this drama that God sets up through a burning bush, through these three strangers, through Balaam's donkey, through the wind, through the pillar of fire and the smoke by day. I mean, God created, and then the ultimate creator puts on human flesh and becomes just a bloke, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, the author of the story
Gets into the story.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It's beautiful. I love it. Love it.
Any last words, Molly or RJ? RJ, it's been great.
Did you think it would go down this path when we talked about Genesis?
No, I love it, and actually, I'm glad that you were here to correct. I mean, even probably some of my thinking on that front, because that's not who I am. Like, I'm not a creative type in that regard, so it's good to think in those terms.
We're all creative.
Yeah, I feel like
creatives.
Well, I'm saying in that realm that you are creative in, the video technical side of things.
no, RJ is definitely redeeming some of my thoughts about the digital world right now. I'm like, just like having these realizations of like, wow, God really is just professional, like making lemonade out of lemons. And like
Totally.
this beautiful thing that has been so perverted, like can and will be redeemed.
Yeah.
And like he's doing that right now through people like you.
He is.
It's really cool. Praise God, though.
And praise God, we get to be at church, where we just have these opportunities and these freedoms to live into how God made us.
Yeah.
And all of the different giftings that we all bring to the table, and it all makes the one body of Christ that we are, and all are required, all are needed. And yeah,
It's great.
it's a great time to be alive.
Yeah. I had a final thought, though, that's a good test about your digital life, because the way you were talking about it would drive me to wonder and more wonder. And so maybe a good litmus test would be, is this driving me to more wonder, or is the way that I'm using this platform or this technology sucking all of the wonder out of my life? Because when I think about you creating a video or writing a song or mashing up something, I think like that would be a wonderful creative experience, a worshipful experience. And that's very different from another way that we might use that technology. And so in light of your message, I just think it's a great sieve for anything that we're doing in our lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this driving wonder? Is this sucking all the wonder out of my life? I don't know.
Yeah, and I have one last thought. When I think about the balance that we want to bring, so we don't want to just like forsake these powerful mediums, these vehicles, to really bring creativity and God's truth and his wonderful story to the world. But on the other side of that coin too, I think we need some desert in our life, some Lent, where we're laying things down, turning things off, so that we can just really be in tune with God. And when I think of that, I always think of the desert. And I think of the desert as this place where God's people have nothing. They have nothing in that space. And yet they lack nothing, because in that place Christ became their everything. And we need that in our life. And I think that's what you're talking about, these students, that they're experiencing, this need, this lack. And that space is good space. We call it desert space. A space where we have nothing, and we experience that. But yet we lack nothing, because in that space, Jesus becomes our everything. And if we add that, I think then the other side of that coin that we were talking about earlier will become that much more creative and powerful and potent, just in what we're bringing to it and how we're doing it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
A lot of powerful stuff happens in the desert, and story comes out of that typically. And then that story is the vehicle for telling, like, it's like the modern vehicle, or it's the vehicle that like God's like how his character gets kind of portrayed through people. And like looking back at how like we've done testimony videos and life story videos here, like we've heard pretty much everything at this point with like people's stories. But like every time someone gets behind that camera and opens up about their life and what God has done with it, you learn a different facet of God's character. And that's, to me, like the biggest like like driving thing for me in shooting video. It's like, hey, every story is like worth telling. And because there's everybody experiences God in just a little bit different way. And then they get to share that with everybody. And that's the cool thing about like video and storytelling, I think. But again,
and the best
podcast for another day.
And the best of that does come out of suffering.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Let's be honest. The best songs are
The
written
desert.
out of the desert, suffering, the best poetry, the best stories.
God meets you in the
Yeah.
desert.
Oh, yeah.
The best ministry.
We'll do a podcast too about all that.
Yeah.
Next time.
This was
Great.
fun, you guys. I
It's
love
awesome. All right. Well,
Thanks for having us.
you got it. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks, guys.
All right, this is the Locker Room where we break down sermons, stories, and scripture for the race of our faith. If this podcast has been serving you, hit follow and the notification bell. Follow Crossroads Locker Room on Instagram because guess what? It's redeemable. In the words of RJ. I love it. No, but thank you, Haley, for doing that. And we love you, Crossroads. Have a great week.